Please give it up really big for Adam Ross, everyone.
Good evening. I walk into Charles's bedroom and I introduce myself with a handshake. Depending on how things go, I could be holding his hand when he dies. In the 10 years before I met Charles, I'd been pretty consumed by my career as an in-house attorney for technology companies. But I'd grown to miss feeling like I made a difference in people's lives like I did when I volunteered at a lot of different causes when I was younger. So I did what everybody in San Francisco does when they want to know something. I got on the Google and I looked for nonprofits in San Francisco and I found something called the Shanti Project. What I learned was that the Shanti Project has been around since 1975, and they take clients who have illnesses like HIV and breast cancer and match them up with peer support volunteers who spend a few hours each week with them providing what they call emotional support. But really, it's more like being big brothers, big sisters, except here the people are equals. Now, I have to admit that I was a little overwhelmed by the idea of doing something so intense, but I really love the Shanti motto. You can be the difference between 0 and 1. So I decided that I was going to go ahead and sign up for their weekend training course. I take the training course, and about 2 weeks later they call me and offer to match me with Charles. They tell me that Charles is a 78-year-old black man. He's actually a straight black man with HIV. He lives alone because his wife died a few years ago and he didn't want to move out of their apartment. Charles also had a stroke several years earlier, so he couldn't really walk or even barely get into his wheelchair on his own. So he depended entirely for support on a home health care worker that would come in every day for a few hours, and then his son and other family members would visit him once a week. They lived about 50 miles away. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that, I actually thought of saying no to the match with Charles because I had absolutely zero experience relating to 78-year-old straight black men. And I just didn't really know if we'd have enough to talk about, in those hours that we would spend together over many months. But I also believe that things sometimes happen for a reason. So I took a leap of faith and said yes. Now, on that first day that I'm meeting Charles, I walk into his bedroom, I'm super nervous. I'm just totally trying to do it right. Thankfully for me, Charles has a really good sense of humor. He's a very easygoing guy. Unfortunately for him, I have no sense of humor because I'm so serious and trying to do everything right on this first meeting. So I can't really tell when he's joking with me, which is pretty much all the time. So it just takes a little while for our relationship to gel. And Charles, like I said, can't really get out of bed, so we spend most of our weekly visits in his bedroom, and we watch TV, his favorite TV shows and reruns, and then we talk about just whatever's on his mind that week. It's only a few days, weeks, months of CSI, Gunsmoke, and Brady Bunch reruns before I decide I have to bring my own DVD player and rent movies so that we can do something else. And at first I bring the Denzel Washington and the Chris Rock movies because he says they're his favorites. But those run out actually surprisingly quickly, which leaves us with the Tyler Perry and the Kevin Hart movies, which are apparently awful. And so I am very relieved when Charles one day says to me, Adam, you don't only have to bring black movies. See, I told you I was the wrong guy for this job, right? But that's pretty much how our visits go every week. And when it's time for me to go, I say, I'll see you next week, buddy. And then Charles, he gives me the thumbs up and says, I'll be here. I'll be here. So it's really just a few days after Charles's 80th birthday when it's like the warranty on all his body parts runs out at once. We go from visits every week at home to visits every week in the hospital. He rallies here and there, but he's getting worse. It's about 3 weeks into his stay in the ICU when I get the call from his son that the doctors don't think they can do any more for him. They're just going to focus on making him more comfortable. I rushed down to the hospital, and I'm surprised to find he's not in the tiny, windowless ICU room that he half-jokingly called the closet. He has now been moved to the top floor of the hospital, and he is in a private room. It's huge. It's got dim lighting and hardwood floors and an amazing view of the city. But Charles, he can't really appreciate this because he now has a heavy flow of morphine and other sedatives flowing through his IV. And in that moment, I felt so lost about what to do or say, even though I'd had that great weekend training. So it was great, by the way, but they didn't cover this. So I just imagined in my head what a good Shanti volunteer would do. I took out my iPhone and I played some relaxing meditation music. And then I took the lotion that was sitting on the table nearby and I massaged his dry, cracked hands. And then I thanked him for the moments that we got to spend together, and I acknowledged him for the long and rich life that he led. When it was finally time to go, I scratched the soft white hair on his head and I said, "Goodbye, buddy." I didn't say, "I'll see you next week this time." The next day, when his son called to say that Charles was gone, I felt a lot of things. I felt regret. I felt regret because I wasn't there to hold his hand when he took his final leap. But I also felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the moments that I was there for Charles over those 18 months. Because in those moments, I got to be the difference between 0 and 1. Thank you.